June 1940. The Channel Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, Sark. Tiny British territories in the English Channel, just miles from the French coast. For centuries, they've enjoyed a quiet existence, British by loyalty, Norman by heritage, independent by spirit. The war on the continent feels distant here, until one morning it arrives on their doorstep. June 28, 1940. German bombers appear over the islands. Without warning, they strafe the harbors. Machine gun fire tears through St. Peter Port in Guernsey, St. Helier in Jersey. Trucks loaded with tomatoes explode. Workers die where they stand. Britain, they realize with horror, has not declared the islands a military zone. The Germans think they're attacking fortified positions. They're wrong. These islands are defenseless, unprotected, abandoned. Within days, German troops land. No resistance, no battle, no defense. For the first time since 1066, foreign soldiers occupy British soil. And the next 5 years, 90,000 British citizens will live under Nazi rule. The only part of Britain conquered in World War II. But this is not a story of military defeat. This is a story of something more complex, more human, more uncomfortable. This is a story of survival, resistance, and the impossible choices ordinary people make when their world is occupied. To understand what happened here, you need to understand what the Channel Islands are. They're not quite British, though they're loyal to the crown. They're not quite French, though they speak French and Norman dialects. They're something unique. Bailiwicks of Jersey and Guernsey with their own laws, their own parliaments, their own identity going back to the Norman conquest. They're farmers and fishermen, bankers and merchants. They're prosperous, peaceful. And in June 1940, they're directly in the path of Hitler's conquering army. France has fallen. The British Expeditionary Force has evacuated from Dunkirk. Churchill's government faces an impossible situation. Defend these tiny islands just miles from occupied France? With what troops, what ships, what aircraft? Britain barely has enough to defend itself. The decision is made quickly, quietly, brutally. The Channel Islands cannot be defended. They must be demilitarized, abandoned, left to their fate. And the islanders? They get a choice. But it's not really a choice at all. Evacuate to England. Leave your homes, your possessions, your lives behind. Or stay and face whatever the Germans bring. In 1 week, 30,000 islanders evacuate. Mostly children, mostly from Guernsey and Alderney. They leave everything. Homes, farms, businesses, pets, memories. Boats overloaded with refugees steam toward England while those left behind watch from the docks. Who made the right choice? Those who fled or those who stayed? Nobody knows yet. But within days, they'll find out what staying means. The German forces arrive not as liberators, not as conquerors in the traditional sense, but as occupiers. And occupation, they will learn, is something entirely different from war. The occupation begins not with violence, but with bureaucracy. Orders are issued, curfews established, radios confiscated, boats impounded. Civilians must carry identity cards, register their possessions, report their movements. The Germans aren't here to destroy these islands. They're here to control them, to exploit them, to turn them into fortresses defending the French coast. And they need the islanders to cooperate, not to resist. Not to cause trouble, just to comply, to survive, to wait for liberation that might never come. The early months are strange, almost civilized. The German forces aren't the SS, they're Wehrmacht, regular army, Some are older men, some are teenagers. Many don't want to be here any more than the islanders want them here. There are rules, structure. The islanders continue working. Farms must produce food, utilities must function, government must operate. But now everything serves German needs first. And slowly, gradually, the occupation's true nature reveals itself. This isn't temporary. This isn't occupation light. This is subjugation, and it's going to last. October 1940. The first deportations begin. Not mass deportations, not yet, but targeted. Anyone born in Britain but not in the islands. Anyone who made anti-German comments. Anyone caught listening to BBC radio. Families torn apart, men, women, children loaded onto ships, sent to internment camps in Germany. The islanders realize this isn't going to be a short occupation. This is going to be years, maybe forever. And they face a question that will haunt them through 5 years of occupation. How do you resist when resistance means death? How do you survive when survival means collaboration? Where's the line between pragmatism and betrayal? 1941. Hitler orders the Channel Islands turned into impregnable fortresses. What he calls the Atlantic Wall will have its strongest point here, on British soil. Thousands of laborers arrive, French, Spanish, Russians, Poles. Many are prisoners of war. Some are political prisoners, all are slaves. They work 16-hour days in brutal conditions, building bunkers, tunnels, gun emplacements, observation towers. The Germans requisition cement, steel, food. The island economy shifts entirely to serving the occupation. And the islanders watch as their homes become a fortress designed to kill other British soldiers should invasion come. Alderney becomes a horror. The smallest island, almost entirely evacuated, turns into a concentration camp. 4 camps, Sylt, Helgoland, Borkum, Norderney, named after German islands, thousands of prisoners, living in subhuman conditions, beaten, starved, worked to death. The exact number who died, unknown, hundreds, maybe thousands. Bodies buried in mass graves or dumped at sea. This is Nazi occupation at its darkest, happening on British territory. While the rest of Britain fights, these slaves die building defenses on British soil. And the remaining islanders, they see it, they know, but what can they do? Speaking out means joining the prisoners. Helping means execution. Silence feels like complicity. But silence is survival. On Jersey and Guernsey, life grinds down, food rations shrink, luxuries disappear. Then necessities vanish, soap becomes precious, tea is a memory, sugar, butter, meat, reserved for German forces. Islanders eat turnips, seaweed, whatever they can grow in secret gardens. The black market flourishes. Risk your life for a loaf of bread. Trade family heirlooms for eggs. Everyone becomes a criminal of necessity because following German regulations means starvation, and the Germans know it. They use hunger as control. Obey and you might eat. Resist and you starve. Christmas, 1941. Third Christmas under occupation. Churchill has promised liberation. But when? The war news is terrible. Britain stands alone. Russia is bleeding. America hasn't joined yet. Liberation feels like a fantasy. So the islanders adapt. Not collaboration exactly, not resistance either. Something in between. Quiet defiance, small acts of sabotage, workers accidentally damaging German equipment, farmers hiding food from requisition, teachers secretly teaching British history. It's not dramatic, it's not heroic in the traditional sense, but it's resistance nonetheless. The Germans call them acts of sabotage, and punishment is brutal, but the islanders continue. Because surrender isn't just physical, it's spiritual. and they refuse to surrender their souls. 1941. The V for Victory campaign begins. Churchill's BBC broadcasts urge occupied peoples to mark VS everywhere. On Jersey and Guernsey, VS appear overnight, on buildings, roads, even on German vehicles. The Germans respond with fury. Death penalties for marking versus mass arrests, interrogations. But the V's keep appearing. It becomes a game, a dangerous, deadly game. Young men risking execution to paint a single letter. Why? Because that V means we are still British. We have not surrendered. We still believe liberation will come. And that belief, however fragile, is worth dying for. Meet Dr. Clarence Hackwell, Jersey physician. He treats German soldiers. He has no choice. But he also secretly treats slave laborers, sneaks them medicine, food, sometimes forged papers. He knows if caught, he'll die. His family will suffer. But how can a doctor watch men die when he can save them? It's men like Hackwell who face the occupation's cruelest dilemma: cooperation that enables resistance. He works within the system to subvert the system. Is that heroism, collaboration, both, neither? The answer isn't simple, and that's what makes this story so human, so complex, so different from typical war narratives. Louisa Gould, shopkeeper, widow, ordinary woman. Her son was killed in the Royal Navy. She decides to honor him by saving an enemy of the Germans. She hides Fyodor Buri, a Russian escapee from the labor camps, feeds him, shelters him for months. She knows the penalty, deportation to concentration camps. But she does it anyway, because some acts of humanity transcend safety, transcend survival, transcend even common sense. Someone later betrays her. She's arrested, sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. She never returns. She dies there in 1945, just before liberation. Was it worth it? Fyodor survived the war because of her. So yes, it was worth it. 1942. The Germans crack down. The Gestapo arrives. The secret police. They're not Wehrmacht. They're SS. They're true believers, and they hunt resistance with fanatical determination, listening to BBC, deportation, helping prisoners, execution, possessing weapons, death. Even owning carrier pigeons is a capital crime. They might carry messages to Britain. The islands become a prison. Barbed wire along beaches, watchtowers, guards, informers. Trust evaporates. Neighbor informs on neighbor. Friends betray friends, sometimes for ideology, often just for food. The occupation corrupts everything it touches. And the worst part, liberation seems further away than ever. The Allies are losing. North Africa is a disaster. Russia might collapse. What if the Germans win? What if this occupation becomes permanent? By mid-1942, the Channel Islands are the most heavily fortified place on Earth per square mile. More concrete used here than on the entire rest of the Atlantic Wall. More guns, more troops, more surveillance. Hitler's paranoid certainty that Britain will invade here means 40,000 German soldiers occupy islands with only 60,000 civilians remaining. But ironically, this massive military presence makes life worse. More mouths to feed, more resources consumed, more tensions, more violence. The islands are drowning under the weight of their supposed importance. And the islanders, they just try to survive one more day, one more week, one more year, however long it takes. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Allied forces storm Normandy beaches just miles away. The islanders hear the explosions, see the bombers overhead, smell the smoke drifting from France. Liberation, finally. Except the Allies bypass the islands, too heavily fortified, not strategically necessary. Why sacrifice thousands of soldiers to liberate 60,000 civilians when the islands are militarily irrelevant? Strategically, it makes sense. But tell that to the islanders who've waited 4 years for this moment. Tell them to wait longer. Tell them they're not worth saving. The announcement devastates them. They're going to be liberated last. After France, after Belgium, after Holland, after Germany itself, perhaps. The most heavily occupied British territory will be freed last, and in the meantime, conditions worsen dramatically. With D-Day, the Channel Islands transform from fortress to prison. The German garrison is cut off. No supplies from France, no reinforcements. Allied ships blockade the islands. Nothing comes in. Nothing goes out. The Germans have huge stockpiles of ammunition but shrinking food stores. They requisition everything. Take food directly from farms, seize livestock, empty stores. Both occupiers and occupied begin to starve. And now the horror intensifies because desperation strips away civilized pretense. Theft becomes survival. Violence erupts over food. German discipline breaks down. Soldiers steal from civilians. Officers lose control. The occupation, previously brutal but organized, descends into chaos. Winter 1944-45 becomes known as the Hunger Winter. Rations drop to starvation level. 900 calories per day, then 600, then less. People eat anything: tree bark, grass, boiled leather. They make coffee from roasted acorns and tea from blackberry leaves. Sugar beet becomes luxury. A single potato is a feast. Children's growth stunts. The elderly die quietly in their sleep from malnutrition. Funerals become daily occurrences. And still the Allies don't come. The war in Europe is almost won, but for the Channel Islands, victory might arrive too late. They might all be dead by the time liberation comes. December 27th, 1944. The SS Vega arrives, a Swedish Red Cross ship carrying food parcels. The Germans, themselves starving, allow it. They inspect every parcel but let them through. Christmas arrives late. Each family receives a Red Cross parcel, tins of milk, chocolate, biscuits, sugar, tea, things they haven't seen in years, luxuries that are now necessities. People weep holding tins of condensed milk. Children ask what chocolate tastes like. This single shipment saves thousands of lives. The Vega returns monthly through spring 1945. Each time, it's another stay of execution, another month of survival. But even with Red Cross supplies, people continue dying. The occupation has lasted too long, the damage too deep, bodies too weakened, spirits too broken. Liberation needs to come soon. There'll be no one left to liberate. Spring 1945. Germany collapses. Hitler commits suicide. The Reich surrenders. But the Channel Islands garrison? They don't surrender. Not immediately. Some German officers want to fight to the last. Make the islands a final redoubt. Others just want it over. The islanders watch their occupiers unravel. These soldiers, who seemed invincible in 1940, now look like what they are. Beaten, exhausted men far from home with nowhere to go. Surrendering means prison camps, starvation, uncertainty. Some Germans try to escape to France, others prepare for a final battle. The islanders realize we might survive 5 years of occupation only to die in the last days. Liberation is so close, but close isn't here. And every day of delay means more death. May 8th, 1945, victory in Europe, VE Day. Across Britain, people celebrate. Across Europe, prisoners are freed. But in the Channel Islands, silence. The Germans haven't formally surrendered. The islands remain occupied. Technically, the war continues here. The islanders listen in secret to BBC broadcasts describing celebrations in London, street parties, dancing, joy. While they sit in darkened homes, still under Nazi control, still hungry, still prisoners. It's perhaps the cruelest irony of the entire occupation. Victory so close they can taste it, but they can't touch it, not yet. May 9th, 1945, 7:15 a.m. HMS Beagle approaches Jersey. On deck, British officers prepare to accept German surrender. On shore, islanders watch in stunned silence. Is this real? After 5 years, are they actually being liberated? Or is this another false hope? The German garrison commander, Admiral Friedrich Hofmeier, finally agrees to surrender, not to fight, not to make a final stand, just to end it. HMS Beagle's commander, Lieutenant Commander P.A. Elborn, steps onto Jersey soil. The first British officer here in 5 years. He raises the Union Jack, and as the flag rises, the sounds begin. First crying, then cheering, then a roar that seems to come from the earth itself. 5 years of suppressed emotion erupting at once. Within hours, the other islands are liberated. Guernsey, Alderney. Sark German troops march into prisoner of war camps. The same camps that held British prisoners now hold Germans. The reversal is complete. But liberation isn't the ecstatic celebration seen elsewhere in Europe. It's more complex. The islanders are exhausted, traumatized, malnourished. Many can barely process what's happening. Some break down weeping. Others stare in silence. Still others immediately begin settling scores, searching for collaborators, informers, those who helped the Germans too much. And the liberation forces are shocked by what they find. Alderney is the worst. British troops find the camps, find the graves, count the dead. The exact number will never be known. The Germans destroyed records. But hundreds died here. Maybe thousands. Worked to death building fortifications. Starved, beaten, murdered on British soil, under British law, in British territory. The liberation brings not just freedom, but also reckoning. The Channel Islands weren't just occupied. They were the site of Nazi atrocities. That truth will complicate the narrative for decades. The evacuees return. 30,000 people who left in 1940 come home in 1945. 5-year-olds are now 10. Teenagers are adults. Parents don't recognize their own children. Homes are destroyed, businesses gone, farms ruined. The islands they left are not the islands they returned to. And the people who stayed, they've changed too. You can't live 5 years under occupation without being marked, without being changed in ways that never fully heal. The reunion is bittersweet. They survived, but at what cost? And not everyone survived. Louisa Gould, dead. Hundreds of others, dead. Thousands of slave laborers, dead. The final accounting of the occupation is written in names that never came home. The German prisoners spend months clearing their own defenses. Mines are everywhere, beaches, fields, roads. Each one must be found and defused. Fortifications built at such cost now demolished. Tunnels sealed. The same soldiers who built the Atlantic Wall now tear it down. There's bitter justice in that. But even this brings complications. Some islanders pity the Germans. These aren't SS. They're just soldiers. Many were conscripts. Many didn't want the war any more than the islanders wanted occupation. How do you hate men who are just men? How do you process 5 years of complex, uncomfortable coexistence? There are no easy answers. The collaboration trials begin, and they reveal the occupation's deepest scars. Who collaborated? Who resisted? Who just survived? The cases expose every shade of gray. A woman who dated a German soldier. Is that collaboration or loneliness? A policeman who arrested resistors under German orders? Is that betrayal or duty? A farmer who sold food to Germans? Is that profiteering or survival? Some cases are obvious. Informers, Gestapo helpers, black marketeers who grew rich on others' suffering. They're convicted, imprisoned. But most cases aren't obvious. Most people did what they had to do to survive. And judging them from outside after the fact feels wrong. But not judging feels wrong too. There's no clean resolution, just complicated, uncomfortable truth. The physical rebuilding takes years, removing fortifications, clearing mines, rebuilding homes, restoring farms. But the psychological rebuilding? That takes generations. The occupation leaves scars that never fully fade. Children who grew up under Nazi rule have their worldview permanently shaped. Adults who made impossible choices carry guilt regardless of what they chose. And the question haunts everyone. Could we have resisted more? Should we have collaborated less? Did we do enough? Did we survive at too high a price? These questions have no answers, but they echo through decades. The British government conducts inquiries. They want to know, how did occupation happen? Who's responsible? Could it happen again? The testimony reveals complexity that defies simple narratives. Yes, some islanders collaborated, but most did what they had to do. The island governments, bailiffs and bureaucrats, walked impossible tightropes, implement German orders or be replaced by Germans who'd be worse. Resist openly and everyone suffers. They chose pragmatic cooperation that sometimes enabled quiet resistance. Was that right? Wrong? Both? The inquiry concludes, they did the best they could in impossible circumstances, but that conclusion satisfies no one. Some wanted vindication. Others wanted accountability. What they get is historical ambiguity. The memorials come slowly, first for obvious heroes, resistance fighters, those who sheltered escapees, those who died in concentration camps. But what about the others? The 90,000 people who lived 5 years under occupation doing neither heroic resistance nor obvious collaboration? Where's their memorial? Their story? It takes decades for the full truth to be told. That survival itself was resistance. That maintaining humanity in dehumanizing circumstances was courage. That refusing to let occupation destroy your soul was victory. These aren't the kind of stories that win medals, but they're the stories that matter most. Alderney's memorials are different, darker. They commemorate atrocity, not resistance. The camps are gone. Germans demolished them before surrender, but the memory remains. Mass graves are found and opened, bodies recovered where possible, given proper burials, but most are lost. Names unknown, nationalities guessed. They were men. They were slaves. They died building fortifications on British territory. The British government's role in their deaths remains controversial. Could Britain have protected these islands? Should Churchill have declared them demilitarized zones earlier, preventing bombing and occupation? Could the Allies have liberated them sooner? These questions will never be fully answered, but they must be asked. Today, the Channel Islands are peaceful again, prosperous. The occupation is history, literally tourist attractions now. You can tour German bunkers, walk through tunnels built by slaves, stand in watchtowers that guarded beaches against invasion that never came. The fortifications that once symbolized oppression now generate tourist revenue. There's irony in that, or perhaps justice. The occupation's physical legacy transformed from threat to education. Each fortification now tells the story. Make sure it's not forgotten. Make sure future generations understand this happened here, on British soil, to British people. It could happen again if we're not vigilant. The survivors are dying now. Each year, fewer remain who remember occupation firsthand. The children of 1940 are the elderly of today. They carry memories no one else has. What it felt like to see swastikas on British buildings, to hear German as the language of authority, to go to bed hungry every night for years, to watch neighbors disappear, to live in constant fear. They tell their stories now, urgently, because soon no one will be left to tell them firsthand. And when they're gone, occupation becomes pure history, no longer living memory, just dates and facts and narratives. Important, yes, but not the same as the trembling voice of someone who lived it. The lessons are taught in schools now. Channel Islands. Children learn what happened to their islands. Some have grandparents who lived through it. Others have no family connection but inherit the collective memory. They learn about resistance, about collaboration, about the moral complexity of survival, about how ordinary people face extraordinary evil, about how occupation isn't just political or military. The Channel Islands look peaceful now, just as they did in June 1940. Beautiful coastlines, quiet villages, British flags flying. But now we know what that peace costs. Now we know it can be shattered in an afternoon by bombs from a clear sky. Now we understand that occupation isn't something that happens elsewhere, to other people, in other times. It happened here, just 75 years ago, to people not very different from us, who made choices not very different from the choices we hope we'd never have to make. And that's what makes this story so powerful, so uncomfortable, so necessary to remember. It's not about heroes and villains. It's about humans and humanity's capacity for both extraordinary courage and ordinary compromises. For resistance and survival, for defiance and collaboration, often in the same person, on the same day, for understandable reasons. The Channel Islands endured 5 years of occupation, 1,800 days, 43,000 hours, every hour a test, every day a choice. They survived, not perfectly, not without cost, not without compromises that haunt descendants today, but they survived. And when liberation came, they were still British, still themselves, still human. The occupation changed them, marked them, scarred them, but it didn't break them. And perhaps that's the real story. Not resistance in the traditional sense, not warfare, not heroism measured in medals and glory, but quiet endurance, persistent humanity, refusal to surrender hope even when hope seemed foolish. That's the victory. That's what matters. That's what makes this story worth remembering. June 1940, the only British territory occupied in World War II, not in some distant colony. Here, the Channel Islands, Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, Sark. For 5 years, 90,000 British citizens lived under Nazi rule. They built quiet resistance, V for victory signs painted in the night, secret radios, hidden prisoners, small acts of defiance that risk death. They endured slave labor camps, starvation, deportation. The liberation they dreamed of finally came. May 9th, 1945. Last British territory freed. The Channel Islands, occupied but never broken. Their story of quiet resistance reminds us, courage isn't always loud.